Now going on to the next stanza. With 1,000 fears that vision's face was ingrained, yet no blood reached there from the upper ground. No guns thumped, or down the flues made moan. So he says that on the face of this man, the man who sprung up from a sleep or from death, there were 1,000 fears etched on his face. That is why his face was grained with 1,000 fears. Okay, and he doesn't call him the soldier or the man. He says the vision, because he felt that this was not a person who was alive. And he sees all these fears on his face, and yet they were standing on safe grounds, because as mentioned in the first line, they were far away from the battleground. No blood could be seen anywhere there, and the blood in the battlefield would not reach here, and the battle was happening somewhere in the upper ground. So that again reinforces the fact that they are somewhere underground. The guns, the thumping sound of the guns could not be heard, and the moan of the people, of the soldiers who were shot or who were wounded, it could not be heard. Down the flues made moan. So here flues are pipes or channels. So here he says that nothing, no sound could be heard from the upper battleground. So it was a very silent place. There was no bloodshed, no guns, no moans. And so he wonders, in spite of being in such a safe place, why is this person or this vision looking so worried? Why is he so upset? So in order to comfort him, he tells him, "Strange friend," I said, "here is no cause to mourn." So he tells the other man, he tries to comfort him, saying, "Strange friend," I said, "here is no cause to mourn. So why are you worried? We are safe here." And now the rest of the poem, except for the last few lines, is the reply of this the other soldier. Okay, and so the other man starts talking in response to his statement, "Strange friend, here is no cause to mourn." And the other man answers in a dead tone, but then what he says is highly sarcastic. He says, "None save the undone years, the hopelessness. Whatever hope is yours was my life also. I went hunting wild." So he says, yes, of course, I know there is nothing to worry here. We are safe. But except for the fact that we have lost so many years, means we are dead. Save the undone years means both of us are dead now. So young, in our early 20s, we are done for. And then you say there is no cause to mourn. That is true. There is no cause at all. Why should we mourn? Our life itself has been lost. So there you can see the sarcasm in what he says. You know, the greatest tragedy is that they have lost their life itself. What more is there to mourn? The worst thing has already happened to them. That is why none save the undone years, the hopelessness that he feels of having lost all his dreams, all his hopes. That is why he continues the idea and he says, "Whatever hope is yours was my life also." So he says, like, these are two men of almost the same age talking to each other. They seem to be people belonging to two different factions. One is British and maybe the other is German. But then young men everywhere, they have the same dreams, the same hopes, the same plans for future. And that is why he says, "Whatever hope is yours was my life also." You, being a young man like me, must definitely have had some hopes about your life. I too had the same. It was my life also. I went hunting wild after the wildest beauty in the world, which lies not calm in eyes or braided hair, but mocks the steady running of the hour. And if it grieves, grieves richlier than here. So he says that I too, like you, went hunting wild after the wildest beauty in the world. I was also a seeker of beauty. And he says, I am not talking about the physical beauty, because that's why he specifically mentions, which lies not calm in eyes or braided hair. So calm in eyes and braided hair, it refers to women. So he says that I am not talking about the beauty of women. I was not searching for physical beauty or the satisfaction of my senses. I was looking for a beauty much beyond that, the ultimate beauty, the beauty that kind of gives you so much of serenity and tranquility, the beauty that would give meaning to your life. So that was what I was searching for. That is why again he continues, but mocks the steady running of the hour. So the beauty that mocks the steady running of the hour, because physical beauty is something that would perish soon. It would, whether it is the beauty of a flower or whether it is the beauty of a woman, after a few days or after a few months, after a few years, that beauty would definitely be destroyed. It would perish. So that is why he says here, I am not looking for the beauty that is short-lived, but I was looking for a beauty that mocks the steady running of the hour. I was looking for eternal beauty. And so he again, maybe like Wilfred Owen. Now here often critics feel that this person who is talking here, the other soldier, is actually Wilfred Owen himself. The soldier, the Wilfred Owen, is talking to the poet, the Wilfred Owen. So this man can be a representation of Owen himself. And so he says, this is not what I wanted to do with my life. I did not want to cut short my life like this in a battle. I had so many hopes. I had aimed at finding beauty, but then nothing happened. For by my glee might many men have laughed, and of my weeping something had been left, which must die now. So he says, if I had been alive, my glee might many men have laughed. By my glee might many men have laughed. So what he means to say there is, if I had been alive, with my glee, glee is happiness, with my glee I could have made many men happy. Had he been given a few more years on earth, he could have made people happy with his own happiness. He could have written beautiful poetry that gave a lot of pleasure to readers. He could have spread positivity that would have been an inspiration to many. But now that is not possible because he is dead. And of my weeping something had been left which must die now. So he says, even of my sorrow, now I am a soldier, I have gone through a lot of sorrow, a lot of gruesome violence, and from all those things I had learned something. I had wept a lot during my experience in the war, but even from that I could have salvaged something for the people who came after me. I could have given them some information regarding, some valuable information regarding the preciousness of life, the futility of war. But then nothing has happened because I had to die so young, such an untimely death. So there is no purpose at all. My happiness could have served them, made them happy. Even from my sorrow I could have given them valuable lessons. But then it must all die now. Now everything that I know must die with me. There is nothing that I can do. I mean the truth untold, the pity of war, the pity war distilled. So he says that he wanted to find beauty, he wanted to find truth, and he also found truth to a large extent, because the battlefield was a place which taught him a lot of truths. And here when we talk about beauty and truth, We can also always refer back to Keats, who talks about beauty and truth in his Grecian urn. So here too, he is not just talking about, as I mentioned earlier, a peripheral kind of a beauty, but he is talking about beauty and truth that goes beyond. Truth that is life-giving, truth that gives purpose to life. So the ultimate truth that makes a person satisfied with his life. So that truth, each of us have a truth to pursue. So all of us, once you find the truth in your life, once you find the purpose of your life, you can lead a very fulfilling kind of a life. We have heard of many saints and seers spending years in meditation, in prayer, wandering around all over the place, seeking the truth, the ultimate truth. So each one of us are actually a seeker. And if and when we find the truth or the purpose of our life becomes very, very content and happy. And so he says, that is the truth that I was looking for. I mean the truth untold, the pity of war. So here he says, in this case, in my case at least, I had discovered a truth about war, and it is a truth that is untold, because nobody would tell openly that war is futile, that wars should not be encouraged. But I could have done that. The pity of war, the pity war distilled. So many young lives are lost. So much of land is devastated, and so much of money is wasted. But then what ultimately comes out of war is pity. There is nothing good that comes out of war. The hatred and the violence, it ultimately leads to large-scale destruction. It leads to the death of the soul itself. It leads to the death of the human spirit. So there is nothing good about a war. And that is why he says, I mean the truth untold, the pity of war, the pity war distilled. So ultimately, when you distill all the experience of the war, what you get, what remains is just pity. There is no triumph, there is no happiness. Ultimately, it's pity. Because war traumatizes people. War takes people away from each other. It destroys families. It takes the son away from the parents. It takes the husband away from the wife. It takes the father away from his children. It takes a person away from his home, from his homeland. So there is nothing positive about war. So that is why here, I mean the truth untold, the pity of war distilled. Now he goes on to the next line. Now men will go content with what we spoiled, or discontent boil bloody and be spilled. So he says, because we have not been able, you and I, we have not been able to go out of this battlefield. We have not succeeded in going out and telling the people that war is futile. And so what will happen hereafter is, men will go content with what we spoiled. So the men who come after us, they will be happy at what we did, at what we spoiled. They will be happy at the number of soldiers that we killed. They will be happy that at the victory that we have won. And so at the spoiled means the spoils of war. So they will be happy with what we have already done. Okay, so the men, they will either be happy with what we did and they will consider us great heroes. They will applaud the sacrifice that we have done, or discontent boil bloody and be spilled. Or if they are not happy with what we have already accomplished, they will carry the war forward and boil bloody. That is, they will allow their blood to boil. And what will happen in a battle when your blood boils? Finally, the blood would be poured out. You will either pour somebody else's blood, or you will yourself will have to pour your blood out. So then, if the people are discontent, if they feel that this is not enough, that we have to prolong the battle would continue, the blood would boil and finally be spilled. They will be swift with swiftness of the tigress. None will break ranks, though nations trek from progress. So they will be swift like the tigress, in the sense that they will not wait to think, because we haven't told them anything. If we had gone out and told them about the truth of war, about the pity of war, we could have somehow curbed them, we could have somehow stopped them. But since we are helpless, since we are unable to do anything, the others who come after us, they will carry this war forward, they will act thoughtlessly, as swift as the tigress, and the battle will go on, the bloodshed will go on, and the earth and the world will move into further darkness. None will break ranks. So he says nobody will break ranks. To break rank means now when you march in a certain formation, to go along with the others is to keep the ranks, left, right, you just go on forward. To fall out of the line is to break rank. So here what he means is, nobody will break ranks, in the sense that even if people know that this war is not right, it is unjust, there is no need for the war, but they will continue to fight. Like for example, Wilfred Owen himself, he too did not support war, but yet he kept fighting, because somehow he wanted to be there right in the center of it. He believed it was his responsibility to his nation. And so, and as mentioned earlier, to express his outcry, he felt he had to be there right in the midst of it. And so the others will act with the swiftness of the tigress, and nobody will break the ranks. People will continue to obey their leaders, their generals, and fight, while nations trek from progress. So there again you should notice that as the battle progresses, what happens to nations? They trek from progress. So that from, the use of the preposition from is very, very significant, because he does not say nations trek towards progress. He says nations trek from progress. That is, the more humanity indulges in war, the farther it moves from progress. It is not a civilized society will definitely seek some other method to resolve issues between nations. Sensible people will not indulge in something as bloody and pointless as a war. So that is why he says that nations actually move away from progress, literally too, because they lose many of their young men, their economy is shattered, their resources are destroyed. So all that will definitely lead the nation to trek from progress or to move away from progress. At the same time, the psychological trauma, the very negative impact of this hatred and violence, that also will have a very negative impact on the psyche of the people. And so in every way, indulging in a battle or indulging in a war will only take you away from progress. So that is why he says, none will break ranks, though nations trek from progress. Courage was mine and I had mystery. Wisdom was mine and I had mastery. So he says, I was a very courageous young man. I was a wise young man. Wisdom was mine and I had the mastery. So he says, I had within me the capacity. I was courageous and I was a wise man. I had the mastery, but then somehow I never managed to talk to the world. But even now, before I could talk, now I am dead. So that is a regret that he expresses. And so he says that courage was mine, I had mastery. I had mystery. Wisdom was mine and I had mastery. to miss the march of this retreating world into vain citadels that are not walled. Okay, so he had the courage to miss the march. He had the wisdom to miss the march. So I guess that is how we should link those lines. So had he been given a chance, he would have broken the ranks. He would have removed himself from the war, and he would have told the world that this is not right, that he does not support war. He would have turned a pacifist, and he would have been happy to miss the march of this retreating world into vain citadels. And where is this world retreating to? Into vain citadels that are not walled. What is a citadel? A citadel is a kind of a fortress. So these people think they are going to achieve or reach a great destination or achieve great success, but actually they do not know that they are retreating into vain citadels. So here vain can be interpreted in two ways. Vain can mean empty citadels, and another meaning can be vain in the sense being very proud. The leaders, they pride themselves on the battle, and they say that English soldiers can fight well, German soldiers can fight well, but then ultimately all this is vain. It is all empty and it is all wasted, because they are never going to reach victory. Whoever wins, even if Germany wins or England wins, the suffering is equal on both sides. It is just material victory that they would be achieving. Inside, both the Englishmen and the Germans will be dead. So that is why, to miss the march, he had the courage to miss the march of this retreating world. He had the wisdom to miss the march of this retreating world into vain citadels that are not walled. Then, when much blood had clogged their chariot wheels, I would go up and wash them from sweet wells, even with truths that lie too deep for taint. So he says that the world would of course go on with the battle, and when there is too much blood, when their chariot wheels cannot move any further, it is clogged with blood, then I would go up to them and wash their wheels from sweet wells, with water from sweet wells, even with truths that lie too deep for taint. So what he means there is, and ultimately there would come a time when people would get tired of this bloodshed and violence, and then I would go forward and I would try to tell them the truth that he has discovered, even with truths that lie too deep for taint. So what he means is that the ultimate truth, the truth that is untainted, the truth of all times, that violence will never lead to success, that it is in love that humanity should find its moorings, not in hatred. Now this is a truth that people have known for ages. This is the truth that our scriptures have been trying to tell us, that we should love each other, that we should be compassionate to each other. This is the ultimate truth. But then we tend to forget it quite often. That is why he says that if given a chance, he would go up and wash them. Here is what is the picture here, that he would wash the blood from the clogged chariot wheels, meaning to say that he would try to talk sense to these people, try to tell them that try to make them understand the truth of life, the truth of love, the truth of compassion. I would have poured my spirit without stint, but not through wounds. So he says that I would happily have poured my spirit without stint, without limit, without any restraint. I would go to any extent. I would go to any extent to make people understand the truth of the war, the pity of the war. But then, even now, I had to pour my spirit, in the sense that he died. He was wounded and his life spirit, it escaped from him. But he says that is not what I wanted to do. I would have willingly poured my spirit out without any stint, without any limit or restraint, in order to enlighten the people, in order to bring home the truth to them, but not through wounds. He says, but it was not my choice to pour my spirit through my wound, in the sense killing somebody or getting killed in the battle was not how I wanted to do it, but unfortunately that is what happened. So I would have poured my spirit without stint, but not through wounds, not on the cess of war. That is, he is quite unhappy that he had to die in the battle. Cess of war. Cess means a kind of a quagmire, a kind of a pool of dirty water, a pool of stinking, stagnant water. So he compares the war to a cess, a pool of negativity, a pool of hatred and violence. And so he says, I would any day, I would prefer to pour my spirit on. And definitely, he says, I wouldn't waste my energy for war. I would not have been willing to sacrifice my life for war, because war is something so negative. Not on the cess of war. Foreheads of men have bled where no wounds were. So he says that you do not have to be wounded in order to bleed. Even your hearts can bleed. And he says that you can read many meanings into this line. Foreheads of men have bled where no wounds were. So maybe he's talking about soldiers who were not wounded in the war, in the battle, but men who were traumatized, whose minds bore a lasting scar of what happened. Because when you witness the gruesome activities in the battlefield, when you undergo a lot of tragic events, when you lose your friends in front of you, all this makes you bleed, though you yourself are not wounded. So maybe that is what he means by saying that foreheads of men have bled where no wounds were. Or he may also be talking about people like writers, poets and writers, philosophers, whose heart bleeds, though they have not been wounded physically, but who have worried so much about the battle, who have tried to talk and express their ideas and speak against the battle. Now we know that people like W.B. Yeats and C.M. Joad and all these writers, even Auden, all of them were against war. They tried to stop people from fighting. They, through their poems and through their speeches, they tried to make the others understand the futility of war. So maybe here the reference of foreheads of men that have bled where no wounds were, maybe it refers to such people who have been agonized by war, though they have not actually taken part in it. So he regrets that he had to be killed in a war. He regrets that his life energy had to be poured out for the sake of a useless war. He would have been much happier if he could do something fruitful with his life, if he could reveal to the world the pity of war and the hopelessness of battles. So he couldn't do any of this. So he says all this, and now suddenly, so he stops there, and then he says, now he addresses this soldier and tells him, I am the enemy you killed, my friend. I knew you in this dark, for so you frowned yesterday through me as you jabbed and killed. I parried, but my hands were loath and cold. Let us sleep now. So the poem kind of comes to an abrupt end. So in a spontaneous overflow, the soldier, he expresses all his regret and all his unhappiness at what happened, and then he tells this person, the first person who came through the tunnel, he tells him, I am the enemy you killed. So you remember it was mentioned in the beginning of the poem that when the man who came into the tunnel, when he was probing the bodies, one stood up or one sprang up and stared with piteous recognition. So now here again there is this connection to this. So now we are going back to the beginning of the poem, and so now he says that now we understand that these people had already met earlier. In fact, they had met the day before. That is why a flash of recognition was seen in the eye of this dead man, and he says, now this is the connection between the two of them. I am the enemy you killed, my friend. Now just look at that sentence. In the same sentence you have the enemy and the friend. So he says, my dear friend, I am the soldier that you killed yesterday. So yes, so he reminds him, you remember you killed somebody yesterday? That was me. And in the way he calls him my friend, you can see that there is no bitterness, there is no anger, there is no hatred, there is no revenge, nothing. He simply makes a statement, I am the enemy you killed, my friend. I knew you in this dark. So he says, I can recognize you even though it is dark now, because for so you frowned yesterday through me as you jabbed and killed. Because yesterday too, when you came and jabbed me, or when you plunged your bayonet into my chest, you had the same frown on your face, the same frown that you have now, or when you had as you were probing dead bodies. Now you know that during a battle, when you're killing people, or when you're looking, probing dead bodies to see whether your friends are there among those dead bodies, you definitely will not have a smiling face, you will have a frown on your face. You can't kill a person with a smile on your face. So that is why he says that I recognize you very well, because you had the same frown on your face yesterday when you jabbed me. And jabbing is poking somebody with something really sharp. And so here in the battle, we know that the soldiers use a gun, and at the tip of the gun you also have a sharp blade attached, which is called the bayonet, and the bayonet is used to stab people and kill them. And so yesterday you stabbed me and killed me, and I parried. He says that when you were coming forward to attack me, I parried. Parried is to lift your hands and try to defend yourself, or to try to move away from the attack. But then he says, but my hands were loath and cold. So he says, I attempted a very feeble defense, but then I did not have the will to do anything further, because my hands were loath and cold. Loath, reluctant. Here it means reluctant. So loath generally means hatred, but here it means that his hands were, maybe he too was in the battlefield for a long time, he was cold, he was tired, he was exhausted, or maybe he was tired, mentally exhausted, because he was tired of this war. And many of these soldiers, including Wilfred Owen, they were quite bitter that they had a feeling that the war could have been stopped earlier. And he accused, when he wrote to his mother in one of his letters, he has mentioned that the government or whoever was ruling, they could have stopped the war earlier, but then they didn't. So maybe he had given up on the whole thing. So maybe the soldiers felt, they were hoping that the war would end today, the war would end tomorrow, but it was going on endlessly. So they were just resigned to their fate, and they had lost their will to fight. So maybe that is why his hands were loath and cold. He did not try to really fight against him. He just made a very feeble attempt at defense, and then he gave up. He just allowed this other man to kill him. And so he says, let us sleep now. That's the last line of the poem. Let us sleep now. In the sense that let us stop all this. Let us just stop and succumb to death. Or here sleep means let us just surrender ourselves to death, because death is the only hope that remains. Death is the only escape that is offered to them. So let us accept and embrace death. And so on a very pessimistic note, the poem ends. So that is the poem Strange Meeting. And now when we try to look at the title, after we have read the whole poem, when you try to look at the title, what is strange about this meeting? There are many things that are strange here. For one, it is strange because this is a meeting that does not happen on earth. It is a meeting that happens in hell. Okay, that is a very strange thing. Then for the second thing is that these two people who meet each other, they are not alive. So again, it is a meeting of two dead men. That again is something strange, looking at it from our living world. And yet another strange aspect here is that it is not two friends that are meeting, it is two enemies. Two enemies are meeting. So that again, but then they are meeting without any animosity. They have no hatred for each other. They have only compassion for each other. And that is why it is, again, it is strange. And you remember the line where you had the enemy and the friend together. So what is the message that gives us? The message is that men are separated by political agendas and by so-called battles. But then men, even in spite of all these divisions, they are still bound together by a kind of a fraternal feeling. When they fight, of course, they are enemies. But at other times, a British soldier has nothing against a German soldier, or a German soldier has no lifelong hatred for a British soldier. They are just fighting for the sake of fighting because they are participating in a battle. At other times, there is no rivalry between them. Now, during the World War I, there is this very famous incident. There are even photographs of that particular incident, of how on the eve of Christmas, the soldiers, they stopped war for some time, and it is said that the British soldiers reported that on the German side they started hearing Christmas carols being sung, and slowly the mood of Christmas set in, and people slowly put their heads out of their trenches. Nobody shot them. They stopped. They gave leave to their arms and guns for some time, and slowly people came out onto the no man's land. That you know that in between the German side and the French side, and the French or British side, there would be an area which is called the no man's land. And so the soldiers slowly ventured out into this no man's land, and they started singing. The British people started singing Christmas carols. The Germans were singing their Christmas carols. They came together. They slowly started talking to each other, and they started exchanging small gifts, whatever they had, small gifts to each other. And it is also said that somebody found a football, an old damaged football lying there, and they started playing a ball game together. And there is a very famous photograph of this particular incident. So what does this show? It shows that there are no there is no constant or there is no consistent enmity between these two sides. It is just that human beings are sometimes reduced to be scapegoats in the games played by people sitting high above us, and we just do things that we are asked to do, though we know that it is not right. So here, that again is the message given by that football game. And here in this poem too, these two soldiers meeting and them having no kind of hatred for each other also symbolizes that very noble idea that love and compassion can definitely overpower hatred and violence. And so that is what Wilfred Owen too is trying to tell us through this poem. He is trying to bring out the pity of war, because in his preface to his poems he has mentioned that his aim in writing poetry, his objective in writing poetry, is to reveal the pity of war. And even poets like Siegfried Sassoon, even while he was a soldier risking a court martial, he spoke openly against battle. And so even many of these soldiers, including Owen and Siegfried Sassoon, they went back to battle itself. That itself was a protest. They were not supporting the nation, but they were doing it because that was something that was morally their responsibility, but they were not for it. And so all these war poets, they wrote poetry that helped to open the public eye towards the truth of war. So this particular poem, The Strange Meeting, is considered to be one of the best poems among the war poems. And so this poem, Strange Meeting, is considered to be one of the best of the war poems. And Wilfred Owen, though he has written very few poems, he remains unchallenged as the most popular of the war poets.